families across the globe gather around the wireless for this, the life and music of today's purveyors of light entertainment, presented to you through informative international radio broadcast by Britain's own premier purveyor of hot jazz and swinging syncopation. And here he is, the essence of class, sophistication, the airwaves' favourite radio raconteur, leading you in the Jack Calloway Show. And welcome to the Jack Calloway Show, broadcasting here on Phonotone Classic. Today we are exploring the Glenn Crytzer story, and I am joined by the New York City-based bandleader, arranger, composer, guitarist, and vocalist, Mr. Glenn Crytzer. How are you doing?
Hi, Jack. How are you doing? I'm well here in New York, and glad to be with you today.
Oh, it's certainly a pleasure to be with you. So, let's get straight in to the Glenn Crytzer story. Where do we begin?
Boy, well, I dug into this music in my mid-20s. I was a classical musician before this and got interested in it through swing dancing. So as I got more and more into dancing, back in the late 90s, this is, a lot of the music was the neo swing, kind of jump swing type stuff. But I started getting more and more interested in the older stuff and digging further and further backward. And really fell in love with the music of the, like the late 20s through the mid 40s is kind of my favorite stuff. But sadly, but very few people, I should say, were playing that type of music live. And, there wasn't a great deal of emphasis at that time on like performance practice, authentic to period. And I thought, boy, I wish there was. I wish that existed. And so I just decided to do it. I started just kind of getting into it a little bit for fun while I was in grad school. I took up playing the banjo and started teaching myself, and took up the guitar after I left school, and just kind of taught myself and listened to records and, read things and figured out how to really try to capture, the styles, the sound of the recordings, the different ways that different bands played, the nuance of the difference between different localities and time periods and things like that.
Okay, and who was your sort of inspiring artist, or which record did you hear to think, I need to play this kind of music?
I don't know if there was one specific, but I definitely know that the Basie on Decca stuff had a big influence on me, because it's just, that rhythm section is just so unbelievable, and the way that they're knit together, the way that the Freddie Green's guitar just fits into Joe Jones's hi-hat, and it just all like locks. So that was definitely one of the, I think big inspirations for me, at least for how a rhythm section, ought to sound. But, so much of that stuff, I mean, just discovering the difference between, the subtle differences between, Chick Webb's sound and Gene Krupa's sound and, Buddy Rich's sound all on the hi-hat, and little differences, and trying to hear and figure out what different people were doing. That's kind of always what's inspired me.
Indeed. So a lot of study then, a lot of fresh out of grad school, and then here we are, listening to 1920s, 1930s, and some 1940s big band music. And you're right, there is definite subtle differences between them in most of the big bands. And so we're fresh out of grad school. Is this when the band started, or was there another band before the Glenn Crytzer Orchestra that we know today?
Well, yes, there was before that. So when I was in grad school, I mentioned I took up banjo just for fun, and we started a group at the school. There was a bunch of classical musicians who just kind of, they let us do it as an independent study, and essentially we kind of taught ourselves, how to play, it was sort of a very generic trad jazz. It wasn't, real deep and specific, because we were just kind of a learning band, And then after that, when I left school, I moved out to Seattle, and I got my first band started out there, and that was a small group. That was called Glenn Crytzer and his Syncopators, and that was still, very like in the kind of Dixieland vibe. I mean, it was, banjo and a small like 5, 6, 7 piece combo at first. And then I took up guitar and started playing guitar around 2008 and started kind of building from there. So my first record was a big band record, which is a whole other story. But then we did a Syncopators record and a live Syncopators record, and then I did some 7-piece things, and now I mostly focus on the orchestra. I'll, still do some combo stuff, but lately I've been focused mostly on the orchestra.
Oh, brilliant. Now, do you remember your first gig as a jazz musician or as a band leader?
Oh, I guess, I mean, I don't know what counts as a proper gig, but when I had when we had the learning band, when I was in school, we did a couple of gigs outside of the school for the Early Jazz Society in Cleveland. So one was for them at their meeting, and it was at some hall. I don't remember the name of the hall. And then the other was there was a place on Sundays in Cleveland that had an orchestra called the Night Owls Orchestra. And it was like a 1920s dance band, and I would go listen to them every week. And that was a place. It was a little bar called the Barking Spider. It was right off of the Cleveland Institute of Music campus. Right in the University Circle area there. And they would play in this little tiny place where the band took up half the bar. And we managed to book a gig there. I don't even think it paid anything, but we just, it was like, oh yeah, you can come in and play a couple sets after they play on Sundays. And, that was I think the first gig playing jazz.
Was there ever sort of any hesitation in those early days? Is this really what I want to be doing, or was this the pinnacle moment when you thought, right, it's this way and no other way?
No, I think it happened gradually for me. It was, grad school for classical music I was a composition major, and it was a very, very, intense degree at conservatory, doing a master's in composition. It was a whole lot of writing, a couple hours of music, while I was there. And I needed something just to blow off steam, which is why I took up the banjo just for fun. And then it was really after I got out of school, I was still kind of just doing it for fun. But then I realized, nobody's really doing this thing that I really like. And maybe I could be the guy that does that, So it just kind of slowly developed over time. I mean, I didn't start doing this full time until 2009 or 10, something like 2010, I think, was when I went full time. So.
And then this going full time, was this still in Cleveland or was this in New York? Was this the big move to New York then?
That was Seattle. I was in Seattle for 7 years.
Seattle, sorry,
Cleveland and New York, yeah. So I finished school in 2006. I moved out to Seattle and got a band started out there in 2007. And then I was out there until 14, and then I moved to New York in 14. So I've been here for 6 years. So yeah, the first half of my catalog was all recorded in Seattle, and then the newer stuff, Uptown Jump, Ain't It Grand, Underneath the Mistletoe, and then the new one, The Melody That Follows Me, the little EP, those were all recorded here in New York.
And what would you say is a pinnacle difference, if you will, from your early band and the early musicians to the musicians that you have now? As a fellow band leader, we'll know that we tend to go through quite a staff of musicians over the course of time until we find that sound and that group.
Well, I think that, Seattle has really excellent musicians, but it's just smaller than New York. The pool is smaller, and so I always found it really difficult in Seattle, after the first couple of guys that, if your regular guy can't make the gig and there's like one other guy on each instrument that would do a good job on your book, and that knows the style and stuff. And then after that, it's good players, but they're just not really into, which, is a thing I think worldwide. It's just there's just not as many people who are into this style and deeply into it. So that was a big thing out there. But I think, the biggest changes in terms of the recordings are just that, my ears have gotten better. And my level of detail has gotten better, and what I'm asking for from musicians is more detailed and is more nuanced my ways of recording have become more detailed and nuanced. And so, because of all of those things, I think the recordings come out a lot. The early stuff sounds pretty authentic, but like, if you're a real nerd like I am, the new stuff sounds really authentic, and I hope to keep, just digging into that deeper and deeper and really, developing, something that is essentially indistinguishable, I hope, from an old record.
Definitely, and I think that the strive for authenticity, you're definitely not alone in that one. It's just as infectious as New York. That strive for the authentic sound in preserving this music that we love. And speaking of music that we love, this first track that you sent me, tell me more about this record.
Sure. Well, this is a tune called Dickey's Blues, and this is one of my originals. I probably should have mentioned in the course of all this that I write a lot of original stuff, and much of what we record is my own stuff, because obviously there's people, focusing on playing old music, and then there's people who are into the authentic performance practice. But I think the authentic composing practice, of working within these styles and writing new things is something that is, that ought to be kept alive too. And I love to write music, obviously, so I write stuff in old styles. So this tune is Dickey's Blues, and it's, funny enough, composed all of leitmotifs from Wagner's Ring Cycle. So if you're into opera, I was working at Seattle Opera when I wrote this. So if you're into opera, this will be right up your alley. You'll hear a lot of motifs from the Ring, and they're sort of fused together into a sort of like kind of I guess it's sort of like a late 20s, Ellington-y type of vibe, slow drag kind of tune.
So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Here's Glenn Crytzer and Dickey's Blues. there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Dickie's Blues by Glenn Crytzer. And what a tune, a nice sort of raunchy tune as well to get us started. So you say that there's a lot of Wagner in this. Is there any other influences into this tune?
Well, just the Wagner and the early Ellington kind of vibe. There's a little bit of, in the trumpet solo, that's Ben Pulser, and the trumpet solo, obviously a little bit of New Orleans feel, just because Ben is obviously a New Orleans guy, and but that's kind of the vibe with that one. The early Ellington, a little bit of New Orleans in there, and of course the Wagner quotes.
An amazing number and an amazing record. So let's go to New York. You've just arrived in New York. What is the story here? How did you get started in New York?
Well, I had been coming out here quite a bit for a number of years, and I was doing the thing where I would tour around and maybe take a couple of musicians with me and pick people up, locals and things like that. And in New York, obviously a lot of great local musicians that I could pick up. So I'd been doing that, and I'd been getting to know people. And in 2013, I was in a pretty bad car accident while I was out on the road. I broke my shoulder and sliced my head open, and it was bad. That was one of the things that sort of, for me, made me go, maybe I want to get off the road. And New York's a great place to get off the road because there's more work here. There's more, stuff that's in short driving distance from the city as well. So it just seemed like the next logical career move. And I already knew people here. So I came out, I started working, pretty quickly as a sideman, and just started working on getting my stuff going as a band leader, and just, kind of built, or work at the small group a lot first, and, little quartets and things, which I still do. And then worked on getting the big band going. We got a few gigs at the Rainbow Room, which helped get the big band going, and some dance stuff, and then started producing my own residencies and things like that.
These small groups that you got started with, first of all, was this who were these groups? Were they primarily your small groups, or were you just sort of jumping in on another band leader every now and again?
Well, when I first moved, there's a rule in New York that when you become established as a band leader, you get a lot less work as a sideman. But when I first moved, I was working more as a sideman, kind of with, a bunch of other people's groups. I was working with Dandy Wellington, and Mike Davis would call me to do stuff, and, this person, that person. I was subbing with the Nighthawks for a while when I first moved. And then as I got, my stuff going, more and more band leader work, less and less sideman work, as the years have gone on. But yeah, it's I was fortunate to have a weekly quartet job that started right when I moved to New York, with someone I knew from Seattle who owned a bar in New York and gave us a regular gig. And so I was just able to build and develop it from there.
And because your band have quite the image, it's the classic black tie band, music stands, and a real swinging set. That whole image, when did that come about? Was that early on that you had that image of this is what I want, or was it a gradual build up to this?
Well, I think, part of, what people, there's the old saying, people listen with their eyes. And so, the band has to look good if you want people to pay attention. But, I think the tuxedo thing, honestly, is just kind of, it's just the easiest thing to do. I've priced out, getting uniforms made for the band. But if you really want to have something that's not, you don't want your band to look like garbage in the uniforms they have. If you want really nice uniforms, you're probably looking at spending, $500-600 a suit to get them made, if you're getting a whole run of suits made. But then you don't just need enough for the band, then you need enough for multiple sizes for lots of subs and things like that. So when you're dealing with, maybe you need 30 or 40 suits at $500 a pop, it starts getting expensive.
Certainly adds up. There's not enough side jobs out there to pay for that, haven't there?
So someday we will make that happen. But in the meantime, tuxedos are a very easy way to have everybody match and look sharp and look really good. The band fronts are just, they're sort of a necessity, really, to have nice looking band fronts. It just, it looks clean, it looks polished. and having your logo on them. Obviously, every time somebody takes a photo and puts it on Instagram, there's your logo, so you want to do that. But yeah, I mean, it's just, I think it just kind of goes with the turf of you're playing this very classy music. You want to have a look that goes with that.
So in New York, you're composing as much as you possibly can for the band, and suddenly we have this next tune, Glenn's Idea. Tell me more about that.
Well, I mean, the name was just, I couldn't really think of a name for the tune, so I just it's Glenn's idea, because I had, it was my idea. So, and it's just, it's just kind of like a nice mid-tempo swing tune, and features the clarinet on the melody, and it's just a nice kind of groove to dance to, which is obviously something that's always on my mind is, making sure that there's lots and lots of danceable stuff in our repertoire, since we, not only because we play for dancers, but also because this music is linked in its history with dance, or a great deal of it is linked in its history with dance. So that was kind of the goal with this tune. It was just a nice kind of swing and dance tune.
And so here we go, ladies and gentlemen, put on your dancing shoes for Glenn's Idea. have it, ladies and gentlemen, Glenn's idea. But we're going to go straight on to this next tune, one of my personal favourites, and the tune in which I found Glenn Crytzer and his orchestra and just fell immediately in love with this band. It's called Ain't It Grand. So, Glenn, tell me, ain't it grand?
Yeah, well, this is a tune that I wrote obviously for the album, and I got this idea. I wanted the album to have this kind of I wanted it to be something positive, and I wanted to title it something that would feel uplifting and make people feel good about the music, and because obviously this music makes people feel good, and I wanted the title to reflect that. So I got this idea for Ain't It Grand, and the lyrics kind of fleshed out at the same time as the melody for it. I remember I was writing part of it on the subway and just stuck on one bit and trying to figure out the lyrics, and eventually got it all together, and I was pretty pleased with it. And then wrote the arrangement. It's Dandy Wellington is the vocalist on it, and I was pretty was happy with the way this one came out.
And well, let's listen to it, ladies and gentlemen. Ain't It Grand?
Fades out of view, though you're standing in a multitude. There's only she and you. If the birds and the bees have romantic expertise, do they know each time this miracle occurs? For even nature stops to stare and seems to understand. Ain't that sweet? Ain't it charming? Ain't it marvelous and disarming? Ain't it momentous, stupendous, tremendous? Ain't it grand?
Grand, ladies and gentlemen, the Glenn Crytzer Orchestra there, with the wonderful Dandy Wellington on main vocals. So, Glenn, tell me, how did you get started with Dandy, and who else have you worked with in the industry?
So Dandy's, when I first moved here, Dandy was giving me a lot of gigs. He has a lot of restaurant and bar gigs around town, and so I got to know him, and great performer, great singer, and a lot of fun to work with. Just a good, he's a fun hang, and super obviously into the, anybody who knows him, is super into the clothes and stuff, and is really, very, very well dressed, and it's a great resource for me on vintage clothes and stuff as well. in my own collecting of those things. But so besides Dandy, Hannah Gill sings with the band. She's quite young, in her early 20s, but a lot of people may know her from Postmodern Jukebox. She does a lot of those Postmodern Jukebox tours. She's a great singer, and Mike Davis is a regular in the band. A lot of people in the vintage world know Mike. Dennis Lichtman joined just after this record with Ain't It Grand, joined the band. Matt Koza, who leads the Artie Shaw Orchestra, is in the band. Dan Block, who teaches at Juilliard. Jim Fryer, who a lot of people in the trad jazz world know. So, I mean, it's, that's one of the great things about being in New York, is this sort of, you can build this kind of all-star band of people who are not just great players, but who are really into the style. And, that's the thing that's hard to find is to really build a whole band of people who are into it, and also are great musicians. So, I'm very lucky to be able to do that in New York.
So, your latest big band album, Underneath the Mistletoe, a brilliant Christmas album. You don't get artists really today writing new Christmas material. And you, of course, as a composer, have absolutely nailed it down to a T, especially in this next tune. Tell me about Under the Mistletoe.
Thank you. Well, I like Christmas music. I have a soft spot for Christmas music. And, there's a lot of obviously great Christmas classics out there. I feel like, new Christmas stuff that gets written, most of it, I mean, what's the last Christmas song that came out that you can think of that really became part of the canon? It was the Mariah Carey thing, and that was it 25 years ago that came out. So I wanted to write some things that would feel like Christmas classics, and who knows, maybe one will become one. In that old, style that, of all the things that were so popular in the 40s and stuff like that. So I also wanted to, with this album, there's not a lot of Christmas music from the 20s. And so I kind of wanted to create some that would really fit that style. So there's a few things on this record, like the Krampus. We recorded this tune that I wrote called the Krampus, obviously about the German mythical figure, and we did it in this the style of the late 20s Whiteman band with the Rhythm Boys, and Mike Davis and Ricky and Alexander and I sang the harmonies on it. And I mean, it's just goofy and it's fun, but I feel like it kind of has that little bit of a Rhythm Boys irreverence to it. So doing stuff like that, just kind of filling spaces of things that don't exist in the Christmas repertoire like that, doing some things that are representative of the very popular things in the Christmas repertoire, but new stuff in that genre. And then kind of, we took a bunch of older songs that get recorded less in a swing style on this album, and we, I adapted them into arrangements of things, in various styles from various periods. So things like Jolly Old St. Nicholas, and things like, I can't even remember what else is on there, Over the River and Through the Woods, sort of like a 30s kind of Goodman-esque kind of vibe. So, it just kind of was filling spaces of things that maybe we thought there should be more of in the Christmas repertoire, and, kind of creating some new stuff that would be maybe, hopefully will catch on. So we'll see.
We certainly hope that it does catch on. And here we go. We're going to play it live here on Phonotone Classic for you. Here's the Glenn Crytzer Orchestra, Underneath the Mistletoe.
I'm just sitting here and waiting underneath the mistletoe, just anticipating. I ain't got no place to go. I don't want to miss the chance to taste a kiss from your sweet lips, and so I'll simply wait. Other boys who come a-flirting, acting like they're Romeo, end up leaving hurting. I won't even say hello, but if you'd come courting, soon we'd be cavorting. Wish you'd hurry up, it's getting late. I suppose I could probably walk over and strike up a conversation, but gee, that leaves an an awful amount to fate. And I wanna be totally certain this'll lead to a fraternization, so I'm counting on this mistletoe to facilitate. Well, I've been glancing in your direction from underneath the mistletoe, offering my affection here where all the lights are low. All I want for Christmas is a kiss for this miss. Gosh, it's awfully rude to make me wait. Can't you hurry up? It's getting late. Suppose I could probably walk over and strike up a conversation, but gee, that leaves an awful amount to fate. And I wanna be totally certain this'll lead to a fraternization, so I'm counting on this mistletoe to facilitate. I've been glancing in your direction from underneath the mistletoe, offering my affection here where all the lights are low. For this miss, gosh, it's awfully rude to make me wait. Can't you hurry up? It's getting late.
And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, underneath the mistletoe. Now, Glenn, we mentioned earlier about the developing recording style and your study of the recording style. So tell me about that process with you and your band and the most recent developments.
Sure. Well, I think that one of the things that I realized is that early jazz, pre-war jazz, is really the first music that developed alongside of electronic technology, microphone technology, and there were also like a lot of advances in just physical acoustics in the way dance halls and things like that were built. I don't know if they were advances, but they were changes that helped amplify the sound and things like that. And for me, the way this stuff is mic'd, the kinds of equipment that you use, it's really a part of the sound. And so my goal, recording-wise, is to try to get a sound that sounds like an old record, but without the record noise. I want that warm ribbon mic kind of sound. We use live when we perform, we use very few mics. We never use monitors, anything like that. And on recording, it really does make a different sound. And we know that this was important to the band leaders in the 30s and 40s because, I know some guys that played with Benny Goodman in the 80s when Benny was, was kind of the very end of his career. And I heard a story from the bass player that was working with Benny. His name's Murray Wall. And Murray told me, he said, Benny, he walks into Radio City Music Hall and we got a gig at Radio City, and this is, early 80s. And they've got all of these 20 microphones set up and monitors and all of this stuff. And Benny just goes, no, just take that away and take that one away. And he makes them take all the mics away but 3 mics, and they play Radio City Music Hall with 3 mics. And I said, yeah, because that totally makes sense to me because, when you mic everything up close, it sounds different. And there's nothing wrong with that sound, but it's not
very clean.
It's very clean, but it's not just that it's clean. I mean, an instrument mic'd up close sounds different from an instrument mic'd far away. Why? Because first of all, you're getting a different amount of refraction from the room, but second of all, the higher pitches don't travel as far. So smaller high, like the timbre of the sound is going to be different because the higher overtones are going to be less present. And so that's there's also the idea that all these sounds are hitting each other before they hit the mic, and so those waves are all affecting each other. So, I mean, you can look at it from the nerdy scientific perspective, which I've done to the extent that my scientific background allows me to do that, and I've had some good coaches in that. But it just sounds different, and I mean, I think anybody can hear that it sounds different. A lot of people go, well, the modern sounds better. And I say, well, why? Why do you think it sounds better? Well, I don't know, because it's clearer. Well, is it clearer? It's just a different sound. Different things are emphasized, and what says to you that that's clearer? And it's really, it's people have been told that that's a better sound, and so they believe it. But a sound is a sound is a sound. If it's what you want it to sound like, then that's what you want it to sound like. And I think that's part of the artistic process that I think kind of got lost at some point. I mean, Benny Goodman was responsible for how Benny Goodman's band sounded in your ears. Jimmy Lunsford was responsible for how his band sounded when it hit your ears. But at some point, we've gone, we just play the notes and we let some other guy deal with how it sounds. And I can't fathom handing over control of how my band sounds to somebody else that doesn't know the style as well as I do, doesn't know what it's supposed to sound like as well. So yeah, that's kind of my feeling on recording and mics and stuff like that. It doesn't mean that we want degraded quality, but it means that like I said, it's the sound of an old record, but without the pops and clicks. I think that's the happy balance, because you're still getting very clear sound, but you're getting clear sound that's shaped the way you want it to be shaped by the equipment you're using.
And speaking of recording, you've recently done a bit of a revelation in music recording, and you've made records during this incredibly difficult time that we're going through. So tell me more about this recording process and ultimately the gems that are these records that have come out of it.
Well, when this whole COVID thing happened, I said, well, what are we going to do here for income, frankly, And I said, well, maybe there's an opportunity to do something interesting here. So what I did was I got together a bunch of musicians who were friends of mine from around the country who, actually getting this band together for a date would be difficult unless someone had a lot of money to spend on all the flights and getting all these people together. But they're all great players. Some are here in New York, some in New Orleans, some on the West Coast. And I said, well, let's get these people together and then let's make a record remotely where everybody just records their parts at home. Now, this is obviously very different than my usual thing, what I would normally do. My ideal sound is everybody in one room with one or two mics. But this is a weird situation, and so we're going to do something weird and interesting to cope with it. So what we did with this record, though, I still wanted to try to get the sound to make it sound like everybody was in one room together. And I think, I think most people, when they listen to it, will go, yeah, he did that. To me, I hear little differences and things, but, I spent hours and hours listening in detail to each of these tracks, trying to get the perfect blend together. So it was a matter of taking folks, who were in different room sizes and things like that, and putting them different distances from the microphones based on how echoey the room was, based on the materials, how the walls were made of, and stuff like that, to try and get a sound where it sounded everybody was in the same room, and also like the same kind of distances from a single mic that they would be in one room. And that was challenging. I mean, I had to really to work with those sounds a lot and massage them a lot in Pro Tools and stuff. But, I think it does sound like a pretty well knitted together record. So I'm proud of that. And we had, an opportunity to bring some really great musicians together on this from around the country. There's Josh Colazzo is on it on drums, Jason Jerzak on bass, Chloe Fioranzo and Evan Christopher on reeds. Ben Patterson is on piano, and Bria Skonberg is on trumpet. So a little 7-piece thing. It's a little 5-song EP. We did one of my originals, one of Bria's originals, one of Jason's originals, and then a couple of classic tunes.
And so this tune is one that you have composed using this method, The Melody That Follows Me. Tell me about that tune. How did it come about?
Sure. Well, this tune is it's a song that I just kind of had this melody stuck in my head for a while, and I couldn't get rid of it, and I couldn't think of any lyrics for it. I couldn't quite find what the song was supposed to be about. And then I realized, well, maybe this song is about a song that's stuck in your head. So it's maybe a little recursive, but that's what I ended up making the song about. The melody that follows me. It's just a happy little tune that kind of gets stuck in your head and is kind of there with you and makes you feel happy when you think of it.
And I am certain that this tune is going to be stuck in the heads of our listeners. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Glenn Crytzer and The Melody That Follows Me.
Following me, it's a simple strain that's made itself at home in my brain. Now when I feel lonely and blue as can be, then my song appears and suddenly my heart's full of cheer. If I could write lyrics to this work of art, I'd be more famous than old Rogers and Hart. For though it's not refined, it will stick inside your mind. It's the melody that follows me, makes me smile when I feel blue. Oh gee, I'd love to share my little tune with you.
Was The Melody That Follows Me by Glenn Crytzer. And Glenn, as a final note to our listeners, what advice would you give to musicians just starting out in the craft, especially musicians and future band leaders that want to specialize in this kind of music?
Sure. There's a few things. The first thing is learn tunes. You can't play with people if you don't know the tunes. You got to know the repertoire. So learn them and learn them right. Don't learn them off of one record and you go, oh, well, that's how because that record might be an arrangement and that's not really how the tune goes. Like learn them right, find the sheet music, and know all the what we call the pineapples, right? All the little things in each tune where it's like the real book doesn't include the correct detail, the correct chord change there. There's pineapple changes, the little weird thing in the tune that you have to remember, like the 4 minor at the end of All of Me or something like that. So learn tunes, learn them the right way. And then the other thing is, I think there's this feeling in the jazz world, sort of the mainstream jazz world, or the jazz industrial complex, as we like to call it, that being a jazz musician is all about this. It's this very flowery idea of like expressing your personal truth through music and stuff like that, and like your own voice and finding your expression, and it's all fine, but I think older styles of jazz are much less focused on the individual than they are focused on how the individual plays as part of a group. So you have to be, as a musician, you have to be contributing to what the group is doing, not showing up and going, I'm like this thing. Okay, well, great, but like, you don't want to show up and be like, well, I'm a bebop musician, so I do this. And you're like, yeah, but we're doing like Chicago style from the late 20s. Or even within the style, like you don't want to be, showing up on the gig to play, I don't know, mid 40s swing stuff and being like, well, I'm really into King Oliver. And you're like, great, be into King Oliver, but on this gig we're doing this. So if you want to be, it's part of like being able to play nice with everybody else when you're a sideman. And as a band leader, you're going to really appreciate that when you get it back from people, because there's a whole world right now that's, when trad jazz got really big, because of things like Boardwalk Empire and, the Great Gatsby movie and stuff like that, there was this big boom in trad jazz. Then suddenly everything was traditional jazz. And so we're kind of having to set ourselves apart as like, okay, you can call that trad jazz, I guess, if you want, but we're people that do this kind of like historical performance practices. Like that's what I like to think of as what I do, like real performance practice in these old different styles. But there's this kind of feeling that's like, yeah, I play trad jazz, and it's sort of like, you learned about New Orleans jazz. Great. That does not, do the work to learn this music if you really want to do it. But I think a lot of people sort of are like, oh, that's popular, I could get gigs doing that, and it's like straight ahead jazz in, suits, and that's trad jazz now. So don't get sucked into that. If you're into this, dig into it. Like people who are good at it, like learn from them, listen to what they do, because I think it's actually a very welcoming community worldwide that we have. I mean, everybody that I've met that's into this music loves when anybody else is into this music, because there's so few of us that we're just excited that other people are like into this thing that we're into. But at the same time, I think the scene can be really cold to people who show up and go, oh yeah, I'm great, and they just kind of do their own thing at like a jam session or something like that, and you're like, you're clearly not participating in what we're all doing here. Like it just feels very unhip, and people will vibe you for that. So, but it's not about like how necessarily great you are. I mean, you want to get great, but it's when you show up, like if you show up and you're like into what the session is about, if it's a 20 session, if it's a 30 session, whatever, or if it's sort of a mix, cool. But like, people sense the vibe when you're into what they're into, when you're listening to Miff Mole and you're listening to, Bunny Berrigan and stuff like that, or, Buck Clayton or whoever. Like people can hear that in your playing and show a lot of openness and friendliness to anybody who's into this thing that we're into. So don't think that just because you're a great player, it means you've dug in on this. Really, really do the work to dig in, and people will like open-armedly welcome you into the scene and help you develop.
Well, you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. This has been the Jack Calloway Show and the Glenn Crytzer story, and we've been here with the living legend himself, Mr. Glenn Crytzer. Glenn, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me.
Jack, thanks so much for having me on the show.
You have been listening to the Jack Calloway Show, ladies and gentlemen, broadcasting to you on Phonotone Classic every Sunday at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Tune in again next time, ladies and gentlemen, as we are joined by another one of our great purveyors of hot jazz, swinging syncopation and light entertainment.